How do we prepare for Yizkor? Paradoxically, by living. We live, we learn, we remember, we mourn, we share, we cope, and if we are lucky,
We learn.
our years will give us wisdom. We grow in understanding. May we grow spiritually. Because made in the divine image, we are also human. Complex, fragile, resilient, with so little time to share, to give. As the prayer book said this morning, lahavin ulahaskil, to understand and to act intelligently. We know the more we explore the world, the more amazing it becomes. The further we probe beyond our solar system, the more miraculous the universe appears. Indeed, the more we share, the more we understand. On Yom Kippur, we proudly join hands with those who stood at Sinai, for those who stood in the courtyards of the temple, in the earliest synagogues, in Jerusalem and in Babylon, in Rome and Warsaw. And today, time seems to mean nothing. Sharing human experience, sharing Jewish experience, means everything. Yizkor. A few days ago, we witnessed the spectacular state funeral in London of Her Royal Highness the Queen. Whilst at almost the same day, here in Melbourne, there was another funeral, stripped by Jewish tradition of the pomp and circumstance. Both funerals honored a beloved mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. Both lives lived to their 90s. Their lives had not been entirely happy or glorious. Each woman faced her own problems, but they lived through it. They had dignity. Their grandchildren were scattered, but they knew that they were loved. They were honored. At their funeral, they did not share the massed bands and the trumpets and the flags, but we understand at this hour that death must be acknowledged and life must be celebrated. How appropriate were those words of Psalm 23. Adonai Roi, the Lord is my shepherd. Lo echsa, I shall not want. And then the paradox. It doesn't always work that way. Lives are cut short. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren may elude us. But the world is shaped in so many different ways, and life, with all its problems, is shared. Judaism says we are the children of the King, Avinu Malkeinu. And on Yom Kippur, we repeat those words again and again. As the Kaddish says, V'yamlich Malchutei, God's majesty will be revealed. As we get older, we understand that life is finite, and God is present, and nothing in the vast universe is lost. And the greatest lesson that all of us must learn and ultimately understand, that young and old, rich and poor, are all equal. The Kaddish asks for no favors. Well, no personal favors. But the children of the King ask and pray, V'yamlich Malchutei, may God's kingdom be revealed, Ba'agala, soon, Ubizman Kariv, soon, God's kingdom. In place of war and threats and aggression and menace, with the shared wisdom of 3,000 years, we Jews of all people dare still to dream of a world of peace. Typically Jewish, typically anti-intuitive. Last week at the United Nations General Assembly, Israel's Prime Minister Yair Lapid dared to share of that vision. He spoke of hope and of peace. I am absolutely certain that that speech won't win him any political favors, but he said it as a Jew, loud and clear. Peace between Palestinians and Jews. Peace between Jews and Jews. It is the only way. And peace in place of those who have forgotten that each of them is the child of a king. Time doesn't seem to be in our favor. We hear the rattle of nuclear weapons. We see the protests against conscription on the streets of Moscow, and the unchecked constant aggression and oppression in Tehran, and the ominous, terrible reports of Chinese torture and the imprisonment of millions, so that one day they can be re-educated. Early on in the book of Genesis, the Torah tells us of Noah and the ark and the great flood, because God could see the world was filled with Hamas, violence. There is an alternative version, the story of a second flood. It's a proverbial non-biblical story, and it includes the proverbial Englishman, Frenchman, German, and Jew. They gather for their Last Supper, following the heavenly announcement that just like Noah, the world was about to be inundated, because the world was filled with the Hebrew word Hamas. And so the four friends speak of going different ways. The Englishman books a table at the Hotel Savoy, stiff upper lip, and went down to the depths, dutifully saluting. The Frenchman drank all the remaining bottles of his precious collection of wine before the water rose. The German went straight to the beer hall and stayed there. And the Jew, of course, hurried home. He said he would use his remaining time to learn how to live underwater. And that is exactly what we have done. In the Middle East, we have ended up with a tiny slice of territory surrounded by feudal and feuding monarchs, maniacs. Yet the world press reports year after year that Israel is the second or third happiest population on the planet. And those people live the longest lives. Innovative, dynamic, argumentative, and strong. Why do we argue? Because we can. Because, as I have often said, because we believe that life must make sense. Because beyond the grave, the good deeds we do live on. Jews don't live on for a mythical pie in the sky. We don't try to invent riddles to believe. We sanctify life. We scatter those years with blessing. We don't excommunicate people who ask questions. We encourage them to dream, to challenge, to aim high. We pursue excellence. And you know, we can see that excellence all around us, not only in the achievements of the State of Israel. We need look no further than the amazing end results of years' work in our Jewish secondary schools. Who can explain it? Top of the list. Or Israel, the start-up nation, like Noah's Ark, an ideas factory that stuns the world, evokes hatred and jealousy and hope. We are the people of the one God. What chutzpah, to aim so high, to aim for the King of Kings. It's not a matter of race. Jews come in all the colors of the world. It must be the Shema. Or perhaps it's the Kaddish. It's the belief that life is good, that each child is to be loved, every life cherished. Vayom hahu yihiyeh Adonai echad. On that day, God's name shall be one. The BBC's favorite rabbi, Lionel Blue, told of the Jewish man with a joke. Two friends meet after many years apart, and they begin to talk. And finally, one says to the other, "You haven't asked me once, how's business?" "I'm sorry," replied the other. "How is your business?" "Don't ask." But Yom Kippur asks us the deepest questions of the heart. Yizkor and Ne'ilah is the time to ask the really big questions. Jews face the same living, infinite force that created Yom Kippur and motivates the Jewish world. We have the ability to imagine, to have a vision of the world, a degree of self-awareness, the merest hint of godly conscience, the unfolding source of life. That's the theme, that's the celebration of this hour. At the beginning of Yizkor, I mentioned Yair Lapid, Prime Minister of Israel, daring to speak about peace in the General Assembly of the United Nations. This year, his words belong to the service of Yizkor. Yair Lapid wrote the biography of his father, and he wrote of the meaning of life. This is his year, and I'm going to share it with you. Of course, it's his personal reflection of matters that happened to him during his own life. And he writes, "The ability to be happy is not connected to the circumstances of our lives. There are people who have gone through things far less horrible than the Holocaust or losing their child in a car accident. And they were far less happy than I have been in a world where there are thousands of books that deal with the secret of happiness, most of them bringing happiness only to their publishers' books. In my opinion, happiness is a characteristic trait. Just as there are people who know how to paint, there are people with a musical ear, and there are people who are adept at happiness. The opposite of happiness is not sadness. Sadness often frames our days to make us understand the meaning of life. It is loneliness, and we are not alone. Our synagogue, our family, our amazing history, our beliefs, our memories, and deepest of all, our shared love of those we remember at this time of Yizkor. The more we can remember, the more we explore the universe, the more amazing it becomes. And the more we share, the more we understand. V'yamlich malchuteh, may God's kingdom dawn for all God's children. Amen.
Unbelievable. You're not Michigan.
I am.
Thank you. That's great.
so profoundly, so personally for his beautiful reflections. Toda Rabba, Briut, Hatzlacha, Parnasa, and only good. On page 1, in the middle of the page, in the booklets that many of you will have in front of you, mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. Psalm 16, Shiviti, can also be followed on page 388 in your Machzor.
Shiviti Adonai, Hanegdita Amid, Gili Balemot. Kilot azov nafshi lishon, lo titen lach lidecha.
The traditional Yizkor prayer asks God to remember the souls of our loved ones and to shelter them for eternity. This is a moment set apart for the solitary reflection, an opportunity to fulfill a sacred obligation, and it is time to feel the physical and emotional closeness of community, the presence of other people who know what we have been through, because they've been through it too. At Yizkor, we see the sorrow in one another's eyes. Shir HaMa'alot. Mima'amakim karaticha Adonai. Adonai, shiva'a v'koli, tihiyana oznecha keshuvot, l'kol tachonunai. momentary gust of wind, never to be seen again. But God's love is infinite and with us forever. God's goodness reaches far into the future. This is the gift of the covenant.
Adonai, Ma'adam, Avadonehu, Ben Enosh, Ben Enosh, Atefashvehu, Adam,
On page 6, corresponding to page 392 in the Machzor.
Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri mim Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz. Al yiten lamot raglecha ve'al yanum shomerecha. Inne lo yanum ve'lo yishan. Inne lo yanum ve'lo yishan. Shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzillecha, al yad yeminecha, al yad yeminecha. Adonai yishmorecha mikol ra, ישמור את נפשך, אדוני בך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
On page 7. I have taught myself to be contented. O God, through all generations, we have found our refuge in you. Before the mountains rose up, before the birth pangs of the earth, you alone have been with us, steadfast and constant for all time. In the end, you return us to dust, saying, "Come home now, daughters and sons of Adam and Eve, you are mortal. In your sight, 1,000 years pass in an instant, like a fleeting watch in the night. But how brief the span of our lives. Our years flow by in a dream. We sleep away our days. In the morning, we blossom in beauty. In the evening, we wither away. Burnt like grass in the blasting heat of summer, we perish like chaff on the wind. A human life may be 70 or 80 years for those who are blessed with strength. So many days consumed by toil and troubles. Then our time is cut short and we fly away. So teach us to number our days that we may bring home a heart of wisdom. Give us a sense of your presence. Nourish us with your compassion. Knowing your love from the dawn of our life, let us live our days in contentment. May our moments of joy surpass the times of struggle. May we taste the sweetness of each precious day. May the work of our hands bring fulfillment.
Adonai rohi lo echsar binot deshe yarbiteini yarbiteini al me menuchot yenachaleni nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo Adonai rohi lo echsar gam ki elech begeit zalmavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi שבטך ומשענתך המה המה ינחמוני תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי דשנת ושמן ראשי Così, così revaya, revaya. Ach tov, tov v'chesed, ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We now proceed in reverent spirit as we recall in silent prayer those we have loved and lost. You may proceed through either in the Machzor from page 396. There appear any number of personal reflections which may apply, or now is an opportunity to recall those who were inscribed on our war memorial and in the tablets of memory that appear in the back of the sanctuary. In a moment, we'll stand and recite Yizkor, which appears on page 20 in the pamphlet. This year in the Yizkor book, I was asked to place a reading which to me was most meaningful, and I'd like to draw your attention to it now. It appears on page 25. So much of what befalls us, the losses that we suffer, seem incomprehensible, untimely, and unfair. But perhaps this reading might explain sufficiently. As it says, our lives are but fine weavings, that God and we prepare, each life becomes a fabric planned and fashioned in God's care. We may not always see just how the weavings intertwine, but we must trust the Master's hand and follow God's design. For God can view the pattern upon the upper side, while we must look from underneath and trust in God to guide. Sometimes a strand of sorrow is added to the plan, and though it is difficult for us, we still must understand that it's God who moved the shuttle, who knows what's best. So we must weave in patience and leave to God the rest. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttles cease to fly shall God unroll the canvas and explain the reason why the dark threads are as needed in the weaver's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern God has planned. Let's read together a familiar Litany of Remembrance on page 26. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter,
We remember them.
In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring,
We remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer,
We remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn,
We remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends,
We remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength,
We remember them.
when we are lost and sick at heart,
We remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share,
We remember them.
so long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember
We remember them.
We are going to call upon Rabbi Morgan to come join together with myself and the cantor as we read aloud the names of those who in our community and in Melbourne Jewry have been laid to rest only this year. These, along with those from our families who reside at some distance. We remember each, including Antonia Abel, Barbara Banks, Reva Berry, Mikhail Belsky, Philip Bender, Albert Bentata, Lionel Berkowitz, Rhonda Bernstein Schulz, Gilberto Biondi, Marjorie Bloom, Karen Pamela Bloomberg, Tatiana Boyarsky, Doris Burston, David Caffin, Moses Cass, Shirley Cass, Peter Sentner, Rose Philip Cohen, Ralph Collins, Rebecca Copeland, and Lady Anna Cowan.
Georgia Dawborn, Barry Deitch, Helga Duband, Pam Dura, David Efron, Michael Ager, Joseph Epstein, Werner Falk, Beryl Feldman, Donald Keith Finkelstein, Rena Fox, Peter Fradgman, Howard Freeman, Simon Friedland, Fuamanu Fuamanutu, Yvonne Furman.
Elizabeth Galushkin, Sophia Gershenson, Rachel Gettler, Rosaline Gomer, John Grossinger, Miriam Grossinger, Shoshana Grumach, Emma Georgi, Paul Hall, Sam Helfenbaum, Michael Herman, Raymond Hirsch, Anthony House-Peters, Ivan Jani, Gustava Jason, Brian Joseph, Thurston Julius, Elizabeth Just.
Minnie Kahan, Tibor Katz, Adele Roslyn Kleingoda, Nathan Cohn, Louis Kornfeld, George David Krawat, Helen Krickstein, Alex Lazich, Muriel Levine, Daniel Levine Einstein, Dora Lukowitz, Simon Lieberman, Helen Light, Marika Marcus, Rabbi Dov Marmer, Neil Matthews, Margaret McPherson.
Eleanor Nadler Schwartz, Judith O'Donnell, Glynis May Perry, Phil Phillips, Antonio Piso, Livia Polgar, Ilsa Priester, Piotr Rabinovich, Michael Rakov, Daniel Ruben, Robert Rosenberg, Danielle Fay Romain, Sylvia Rothman,
Julia Scheinkestel, John Schiller, Leah Schoenfeld, Lawrence Sharp, Ron Sharp, Felicia Silberbach, Gert Silva, Reva Silva, June Simons, Robert Sobey, Keith Steinhardt, Peter Stiebel, Agatha Sigeti, Steve Tiomkin, Suzanne Tomkin, John Troy, George Upton, Eva Urbach, Veronica Vaga, Joyce Wall, Joy Waller, Jeffrey Willits, Ilse Wolfson, Annie Zavod.
Our mourning isn't strictly personal or even regional, but we belong to Klal Yisrael, and we share our sorrows like our simchas with the Jewish people everywhere. And at this hour, we remember Irina McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Catherine Goldstein, Stephen Strauss, and Jackie Sundheim, Jewish victims of the Highland Park shooting in 5782. We mourn the loss of those who died victims of terror in Israel and in defense of the state and its citizens. And we join with the community of people round the world in remembering these especially prominent individuals of Jewish heritage and background who died during this past year. Justice Rosenberg, a professor of languages and literature, who won the French Legion of Honor for his resistance during World War II, the last surviving member of the Varian Fry group that smuggled hundreds of artists and intellectuals out of Nazi-occupied Europe. We remember Stephen Sondheim, Broadway theater's most revered and influential composer-lyricist of the last half of the 20th century, and the driving force behind some of Broadway's most beloved and celebrated shows. We mourn the loss of Noam Shalit, the Israeli father whose 5-year campaign led to the release of his son, Gilad Shalit, former Israeli soldier held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. We remember the passing of Mimi Reinhard, Holocaust survivor who, as a secretary in a forced labor camp in Poland, was responsible for typing up Schindler's List, the some 1,200 names of Jews whose lives ultimately would be saved. We remember and honor the memory of André Gulen, a Belgian school teacher who rescued hundreds of Jewish children during the Holocaust as part of the Belgian underground and kept coded records whenever possible to reunite them with their parents after the war. We remember A.B. Yehoshua, renowned Israeli writer and peace activist, whom Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog described as one of Israel's greatest authors in all generations, who gifted us his unforgettable works, which will continue to accompany us for generations. And finally, Yosef Wallace-Sick, Poland's oldest living righteous among the nations, a member of the Polish resistance, who saved dozens of Jews during the Nazi occupation of Poland by paying bribes and employing them in his factory.
place all of these names along with the book of remembrance of children who have passed away in this year into our ark. Please rise. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, אמצי מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות. יקירינו שהלכו לעולמם, בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסדר גנביו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר Amen. Merciful God, God Most High, let there be perfect rest for the souls of our loved ones who have gone into eternity. May they find shelter in your presence among the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold them close to you forever. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May they find a home in you, and may they rest in peace. And we say,
Amen. Kaddish is recited. We join together, page 55 in the booklet, saying, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru amen, yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei alamaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. Amen. May the source of peace, who makes peace in the high heavens above, make peace in our hearts, reconcile us to our loss, even as we pledge our lives to preserve the memory of those we have loved. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.